Hello, I'm Sandra Viktorova. Thank you for joining us. On October 28th, Norman Merle Grimm Jr. is scheduled to die by lethal injection for the murder of his next-door neighbor in North Florida nearly 27 years ago. He will become the 15th death row inmate in Florida to be executed this year, setting a state record for executions in a calendar year. According to the Department of Corrections, Florida has executed 119 inmates since 1976, when the death penalty was reinstated by the U.S. Supreme Court. 12% of those executions happening in 2025 alone. Earlier this year, Governor Ron DeSantis said that the violent nature of the crimes warranted a death sentence.
Part of it is an appropriate punishment. Part of it is it expresses the outrage of the community, because if you do something less than that, then potentially you're sending a signal that, yeah, it's bad, but not as bad as it could have been. No, these are the worst of the worst.
In 2023, Florida passed significant changes to the death penalty standards. Juries no longer need a unanimous vote for capital punishment in order for the judge to sentence someone to death. Now only 8 of 12 jurors need to agree. Retired Lee County Sheriff's Captain Donnie Fuel supports that change. Fuel's twin brother, 24-year-old Corporal Ronnie Fuel, was shot and killed about 40 years ago while responding to a domestic disturbance call. Dale Connolly had shot his wife in the stomach and fired on deputies at the scene. Connolly received a life sentence with the possibility of parole. He eventually died in jail. Fuel says Connolly should have received the death penalty and supports Governor DeSantis' efforts to increase the number of executions.
I believe capital punishment is a deterrent, but the issue I have with capital punishment is people who are sentenced to death. It takes such a long time for justice to be served, and I don't ever want anybody to be executed who has a chance of being innocent. But the appeals process, and that process can go on for years and years and years and years. And for all those years that you're sitting there on death row, hoping that you can find some way to beat the system, the family is still without their loved one.
To learn more, we are joined by Robin Maher, the executive director of the nonprofit, the Death Penalty Information Center, which studies the impact of executions. Ms. Maher, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So why has there been such a surge in death row executions in Florida this past year? There was only one in the state in 2024.
Yeah, that's a great question. It certainly is a big change from what we saw in recent years. You know, as with most things, the answer is multifactorial. We have a lot of secrecy surrounding the decisions that are being made in Florida. That's part of the problem for us to understand why exactly there has been such a big uptick in the number of executions. One thing is not in dispute, and that is that Florida will lead the country this year in the number of executions, and that's something that's never happened before.
So prior to this year, Governor Ron DeSantis had only issued death warrants for 9 people. What do you think is the motivation for the surge in state executions?
Well, I wish he would tell us, but he has not shared his decision making or the reasons for his decision with the public. But I think that in general, we're seeing a slight uptick in the number of executions because of the political environment that we're in. Certainly, this president, President Trump, has made no secret about his enthusiasm for the death penalty. And it may be that some elected officials, some political actors are scheduling executions in order to show that they are in alignment with the president's policies and wishes.
So I want to talk about opinions on death penalty. You say that opinions about executions are changing. One of your reports from last year cites a Gallup poll that says 55% of U.S. adults age 18 through 43 find the death penalty morally acceptable.
Well, that's right, but that is a number that has been decreasing over the years. That's the big takeaway point. You know, we see that public opinion, public support for the death penalty has been decreasing over the past 20 years. You know, we forget that back before the turn of the century in the late 1990s, we were sentencing to death more than 300 people a year, and we had many more executions, close to 100 at its peak. But those numbers have been dropping along with public support. We now see public opinion dropping from a high of over 80% down to about 53%. And among young people, that opposition to the death penalty is much higher than 50%. And we frankly expect to see those numbers continue to grow.
Ms. Maher, a recent Gallup poll showed that 62% of Floridians now favor life in prison as opposed to the death penalty. Why do you think opinions are shifting?
Well, I think one reason, not unique to Florida, is the cost of the death penalty. Every state that has studied the costs that must be invested in a capital case have found that the death penalty is much more expensive than sentencing someone to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And that comes as a surprise to almost everyone I mentioned that fact to. The other thing that has moved public opinion is the fact that many people are concerned we're just not getting it right. There are many people who have credible claims of innocence who are in the media today on death row with execution scheduled. That has really shaken the confidence of people who believe the death penalty has to get it right or it shouldn't be used at all. And overall, people are just uncomfortable with the amount of resources that need to be invested instead of diverting those resources to things like supporting victims' families or investing in meaningful solutions that will keep communities safer. So for lots of reasons, public support has been shifting for many years.
So since we're talking about exonerations, what do the latest studies show us about how many more people are being exonerated than in previous years?
Well, one thing that Florida holds is the status as the state with the most exonerated people in the country. So Florida has exonerated 30 people. That means it has gotten it wrong 30 times. Sentenced someone to death who was later exonerated by a court of law, not just someone's opinion, but a court of law saying, no, this person was actually innocent. So that's a very unfortunate headline. Across the country, we have seen about 200 people exonerated from death rows, but we know that many more innocent people probably never got the relief they deserved.
So the sudden rise in executions is certainly not unique, though. We have seen similar surges in other states. We know Texas is one of those.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's right. Texas was usually the leader in executions. It has been for many, many years. At its peak, I think it was close to executing 40 people a year. But Florida this year is setting the record for this time at this moment. And it's unfortunate because as a country, we have been moving away from the death penalty. So Florida is an outlier in the way that the rest of the country is trending.
So, Ms. Maher, as you know, recently Pope Leo XIV suggested that supporting capital punishment was inconsistent with being pro-life. There's certainly moral debate on this. Do you expect the Pope's stance to have any impact in this debate?
Well, I think it might. The Catholic Church has been very clear in recent years that use of the death penalty is inconsistent with Catholic faith. And that is also echoed by many other organized religions that have also taken strong positions around the use of the death penalty. You know, as people think about what it means to be pro-life, it really is about the dignity of the human being. And that's something that opponents of the death penalty have always cited when we talk about why it should not be used, that the people in prison, people who are facing execution, are also human beings who deserve that same dignity and consideration.
Ms. Maher, do you think 2025 is an anomaly for the state of Florida, or is this execution trend something that you believe will continue into 2026?
Yeah, well, only time will tell, of course. It's always hard to predict the future, and particularly at this time in history where there are so many unpredictable and uncertain things. But one thing I can say is if we zoom out and we look at the long-term trends, we can see that use of the death penalty and support for the death penalty has been steadily declining for the last 20 years. And there's every reason to believe that it will continue to be that way.
Ms. Maher, we thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for watching. We've got more great content for you, from news to the arts to the environment. So be sure to like and subscribe to WGCU's YouTube channel and follow us on our social media platforms for the stories that matter to you.